go ahead and get started with the episode. So this first story actually comes from a listener. They emailed me. This goes out to, I'm assuming this is a fake name, Shakira. I don't think that's your real name. This is the story of a killer planet, one of many, and a lot of times people go, well, it's the same planet as this. So this is Shakira was walking around downtown and saw this sticker. I don't know where they're at, but they saw this sticker on a light pole that said, so this planet is called Hercolubus. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. And it's also gone by other names like Planet X or Nibiru, but Hercolubus is the name given to this killer planet by the author / esoteric genius, in their own words, V.M. Rabolú. Now, this is a Colombian channeler, a Colombian mystic, who had the visions of this coming planet. And they believe that Hercolubus comes around every so often, every 100,000 years or 15,000 years, or whatever really suits the fancy of the writer. And as it comes within Earth's orbit, it begins to upset the planet, which is obvious. That's what would happen. Huge tidal waves, earthquakes, volcanoes, things like that. And they point to things that this has been going on for basically since the beginning of time, and that's why we have stories like Atlantis and all these civilizations being destroyed. And I'm like, okay, that's possible. Like, obviously, planetary bodies, we are just kind of all floating around in the universe. There's comets have crashed into us, meteorites have crashed into us, things have come close. There is a possibility that a giant planet is on a 100,000-year rotation, and it comes by every 100,000 years and messes stuff up. The thing is that we don't really see any evidence of that. We're not seeing any sort of like gravity effects. We're not entirely sure on it, but it's supposed to be 5 or 6 times the mass of Jupiter, even if it was cycling around. And see, it was supposed to come back around 2012, 2013. If it was that close, if it's supposed to come in within the next 10, 20 years, we would start to detect gravity wobbles. But I'm on board with that. That's definitely possible, that this planet is floating around and it causes these disasters, because we can look back in legends and see these disasters. What I'm not on board with is his solution. So what it is that as the planet gets closer, it's going to cause all these disasters. So we're doomed, right? There's nothing we can do to stop it. But the way to avoid it, so you can't avoid it, like not like Earth goes, puts on the brakes and like skids past us. You meditate and your spirit goes into the astral. You know what I mean? Like, that's where a lot of these stories lose me. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm on board. There could be a planet coming along, and then they're like, find your 5th chakra and move to the light. And then you will go and you will find 8 huckleberries, but only eat the 6th one. No, come on, man. Like, you lose me. A lot of people do this. A lot of these conspiracy theories do that. They just get a little too esoteric for me. Funny point, this guy doesn't like white people either. He says, and this is from one of the websites here, the encounter of the Earth with Hercolubus takes place every sidereal year, whatever that means, and is thus a natural cosmic event. The first few races were not afraid of the disasters since they had not degenerated. They still had extraordinary powers and used them to escape the catastrophes. The protoplasmic and Hyborian races, for example, simply submerged themselves into the 4th dimension when the catastrophes began multiplying. The portion of the Lemurian civilization that had not degenerated did the same, while the rest perished. The vast majority of the Atlanteans died during the submersion of Atlantis, but a small minority was able to escape. Unfortunately, due to the extreme degeneration of the Aryan race, there will be few who will survive the upcoming cataclysms. Thanks, man. And everyone else can do this meditation and eat the 6th huckleberry and so on and go forth this planet. You lose me. Not the racism thing, whatever. That's whatever floats your boat. I don't care about that. Other than I'm going to die in this cataclysm. What loses me is the spiritual side of it. If a giant planet's coming, there's really no dimension I can sneak in or out of to avoid getting just melted by this volcano. What's interesting about this story? Because that's pretty much it. I did a bunch of research on it, and everything just kind of says the same thing. Killer planet, killer planet, killer planet. What's interesting about the story is there are parallels to it that are real. The idea that we have these ancient stories and legends, and it being linked to something that's coming up. So, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm out in Hood River in Oregon. And they found out fairly recently that there's a massive fault line up here. And they're talking about if it ever goes off, it will be one of the biggest earthquakes ever. It will just, everything west of the I-5 will be covered in a tsunami. We're not prepared for it in any sort of way. Who isn't killed in the earthquake is just going to get flattened out there. The New Yorker did an amazing article on it a while back, and I'm going to link it to you. I really recommend reading it. It's a great article about the Pacific Northwest fault line, or I think it's called the Cascadia fault line, and just earthquakes in general. They're talking numbers in the tens of thousands. Massive earthquake. And, you know, I come from California, where everything was earthquake-proof, and up here it's not, really. Hood Rivers probably wouldn't be affected by it. We'd obviously be affected by the refugees coming in from it, and our freeways are going to be down, food supplies, things like that. What's interesting, so, they discovered this fault line, but there was this old Native American legend about a guide. Some hunters went out from their tribe, and there was a great shaking. And when they went back, the entire tribe was underwater. And explorers had heard that story, and they're like, oh, Native Americans are just telling this story. It was an old story, so they were saying, like, my grandparent went through this. Like, there are these stories. They also found in the area, they found a forest of dead trees. And they look at them and they go, well, those trees were killed by salt water. We know those trees were killed by salt water just from testing them and things like that. And they figured that the water table was just a little bit different, and they got flooded, and then over time the water receded and the trees just died from salt water. There was no written history of the area back, say, in the 1700s. The Native Americans had no written history, so we didn't have anything to compare it against. But in Japan, at the time, their written history is impeccable. Their civilization was full bore back in the 1700s. They'd been around for thousands and thousands of years, had written languages and paper, documentation, all that stuff. So in their history, they talk about a 600-mile-long wave hit Japan. And they didn't know where it came from. They just hits them, smashes them. And so they, the people who survived wrote it down in their legends or wrote it down in their history books and said, this happened and all these people died and so on and so forth. What happened was American scientists and Japanese scientists got together and they started comparing notes, and they realized that tsunami, that 600-mile-long tsunami that hit Japan, matched up with the timeline for those trees in that area to be dead by salt water. And so that's when they started thinking, because this research was back in the 80s, that's when they started thinking, what probably happened? Because they had suffered no earthquake in Japan, the tsunami came out of nowhere, and the Cascades are part of the Ring of Fire. The scientists go, maybe we should start looking for a fault line here, because maybe an earthquake happened here and sent that tidal wave, and sure enough, that's what they found. So using these old Native American legends, these Japanese records, they can actually find the causes of these disasters. I think that is far more fascinating than planet flying by, blowing stuff up. But that's just the way it is. That's the way history is. Oh, let me just say, so no. Again, there's a chance that a planet's going to come by and swing by Earth and smash it and stuff like that. It's astronomically small, but it's possible. I think that if it does come by, whether or not you meditate or float around or stop being an Aryan, you're doomed anyways. It's a giant planet, and it's interfering with their gravity, but that's just living in the cosmos. As scary as that is, as dark and as scary and as infinite as that is. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.